There have been people that watch the show going, have you seen this yet? I want your take on this. Have you seen this yet? Have you seen this yet? Finally, I got the opportunity to see the film In a Violent Nature. In a Violent Nature is a film that was put out by Shudder, actually. It's not on Shudder streaming service yet, but Shudder is low-key doing pretty amazing things. Like they will put out movies just straight to their service, their streaming service. It's a horror streaming service, but a lot of them have been good. Like the movie Host that came out during the pandemic was awesome. Late Night with the Devil that went to theaters and then got a digital release and then ended up on Shudder was a Shudder movie. This is the same way. In a Violent Nature got a small theatrical release. Now it's available on like digital on demand where you have to buy or rent. And then eventually it'll be on the streaming service Shudder. But I got to see it this week, and it's a very polarizing movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It wasn't without its flaws, but I really liked it. And I liked a lot of the things that people don't like about it. Now, there are a lot of people that do like it a lot. It's one of those, for me, at the end of the day, I liked it. Would I recommend it? I would recommend it to a very specific person, right? I wouldn't, like, if you hit me up, Hot Dog, and were like, hey, like you have done before, I'm going on a date. This girl likes horror movies. Do you have any recommendations? This would not be one of them for that, because what it does that I like, and this is something that I've talked about before, is the perspective is with the killer in this movie. Now,
Oh, that's what that movie is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, I've wanted this for a long time. When I saw the last Scream movie, I started fantasy booking immediately and saying where I want the Scream franchise to go is eventually the protagonist in this movie becomes Ghostface. And then in the next movie, we're still following her, but now she's Ghostface. And so our perspective changes, where at one point we saw Ghostface as this maniacal killer who is the villain and we want him stopped. Now we're following him, so we see things from his perspective. Maybe it's just the pro wrestling in me that like goes like, yeah, every great villain needs to feel justified in what they're doing. And if that's the case, then told in the right way, you can make an antagonist a protagonist. And I think that's part of what this is. And that's what I hope happens through this movie, that more people start trying to tell that story through the villain, because it's very much, aside from that, like the things that happen in the movie are like right out of the How to Make a Slasher Movie 101 handbook. Every trope is in it. I mean, to the point where some of the scenes feel derivative, like the, young teens, early 20s hanging around a bonfire talking about the legends of the haunted woods and stuff. Like, we've seen all of this stuff before, but that little twist of making it told from the killer's perspective changes it, and for me makes it interesting. It makes it interesting, but it's a different watching experience, because when you're watching a slasher, and I'm not going to do any spoilers, but when you're watching a slasher from the perspective of the victims, the killer comes out of nowhere. You never know where the killer's going to be. There's a suspense. You hear those noises. Very scary. When you're watching from the perspective of the killer, you literally see every move that he makes. You're going with him as he's choosing which victim to hit next. Oh, that's the guy he's going for. Now, it's interesting because you see the back of this victim's head, and you're watching him as he has no idea what's coming, even though you know what's coming. But it's a different type of suspense. There's no real soundtrack to this movie, which I like, but some people don't like. There's no soundtrack. So you're just hearing, and it all takes place in the woods. In a Violent Nature is, I think, a purposeful title because half of the thing is a nature movie. Like, you're looking at the woods, and the shots are long. We take a long time before cutting. Like there are multiple points in the movie where we're just following Johnny is the name of the killer, and we're just following Johnny as he trudges through the woods. Like the camera's behind him, and we're just watching him walk through the woods. It's like those questions of like when you're watching a Friday the 13th movie going like, oh, where is Jason? How did he get over there? Well, we know, but the reason we know is because we spent like minutes just watching him slowly walk through the woods.
How does that translate into horror or like,
well, it's not
scary, or
it's not suspenseful. If that's what you're at. I mean, there's a suspense to it because it's almost like, The Simpsons. I know that little guy's going to do something, like we're walking through the woods, and it's like, I know we're going somewhere, and whenever we get there, it's going to be a big deal. They make up for it. It's interesting because it's like these long sequences of walking or preparing for something or whatever it is. And then at the end of that, the kills are nutso. Like the kills are insane. The kills are tremendous. Like he's folding people up into pretzels. It is awesome. It is so gory. It's all practical effects. It's also shot 4:3, like you're watching on television. Like it's it's not widescreen, so it's interesting. But like it's so crazy, skulls getting caved in, gory. But the time between the gore is not like this high-paced, oh, I'm over here, I'm over there, I'm over here, I'm over there. One of the scenes that I liked, for instance, was like, you know how in a traditional like slasher movie, the campers will wake up the next morning and the dead body will just be on display in this location, like they'll just find it?
Yeah.
So we watch the killer kill somebody at one point, and then he drags the body with him. But we watch him the whole time. Like we're just with him as he's walking all the way through the woods, dragging the body, finding the place he wants to put it, putting it in that place, doing the whole thing. So to me, like I was like interested in the journey. I was very intrigued by all of this. But, I could also respect where somebody was like, yeah, I didn't need to see all this.
Yeah, that sounds like a very difficult. Props to them for trying, but that doesn't seem. It's like you mentioned. Doesn't seem like anything I'd be like interested in, unless because it's like so much empty space. It's almost like a calming. It's what it feels like. This is like the equivalent for you for like a calming waterfall YouTube video, except you just get to watch a killer walking through the video for like 20 minutes.
It is.
And you're like,
there are like it is really calming. It is like, and like if you have YouTube TV, sometimes during the commercial breaks when they haven't sold their local ads, there's just like a Zen thing that pops up where it's just like birds tweeting. Yeah, and that's what it is. And a huge portion of the audio of the movie is Johnny's footsteps walking through the grass and the leaves and stuff like that in the forest. And it's a beautiful day. And you're like, oh, this is really nice.
And you get to be like, you have it in the background while you're working.
Yeah, 100%. And then you turn around and he's like repeatedly taking an axe to somebody's face. And you're like, oh, never mind. Like you have it on with your wife. And for a second, she's like, oh, this is really nice. And you're like, can you shut your eyes for a minute?
It's about to get very violent.
But then it'll be nice again. I promise. Yeah, like we don't really get to know the victims at all. We don't really care. But I think that that's done intentionally, And when they do it this way, it also feels like there's more reality to it, even though it's like a zombie killer. Like the killer is Jason Voorhees. Like it's Jason Voorhees, but he walks like Michael Myers. So it's almost like a slower moving Jason Voorhees. And the prosthetics, like the kills and the practical effects are awesome. The prosthetics feel very much like he's like they're gloves and a mask, as opposed to like, makeup. Although when they show his face finally, the way his face moves is pretty cool. I did enjoy that.
Now, does it feel? Is the reason you're like reviewing it the way you are is because you really, really like the concept, but you feel it's a little half baked, or do you just feel like this is how it should have been done, but it's just not for everybody?
I don't feel like it's half baked. I feel like it's not for everybody.
What would you have made better if it, because it seems very interesting.
I would have added. I would have added more story to it, like far more story elements, making it so that like every scene really counted. I mean, but that's just how I would. That's kind of how I would do anything. I would want to make sure that every kind of minute counts. And there are some points where it's like, no, let's just have nothing happening here, because sometimes the fear of the unknown does it all. Like, I'm not against that, but yeah, I mean, it was a 90-minute movie that felt like it could have been 60. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
and so, you know, I wouldn't say, though, some people say it's elevated horror. I don't think it's elevated horror at all. Like, you know, elevated horror is a real genre now, where, you know,
what does that mean?
It's like you try to class up a horror movie, where horror movies have always been looked at as these kind of like, you know, schlocky B-movie things. When you try to make like a art film that is also a horror movie, they call that elevated horror. And the reason I wouldn't call this elevated horror is because all of the real horror elements are straight up tropes. Like, they're things that we've seen 100 times in 100 horror movies. So, you know,
what would you consider elevated horror? Is Parasite one?
Parasite's
is Parasite a horror movie?
Maybe more thriller. Parasite's, I feel like, an elevated thriller. You could argue that The Menu is elevated horror. You could argue that Midsummer is elevated horror.
Okay.
You know, something like that. Some people would say The Menu's not. I think it is. I think The Menu is a good example of elevated horror. Yeah. Yeah, so like for me, I would absolutely watch this again. Like, I had a blast. Even like at the end, I was like, I don't think this ending is hitting. And then it kind of did for me. And I was like, oh, you know what? I didn't mind it at all. Like, I felt like it was taking a while, and then we weren't getting to where I thought we were getting to. But I still was like, I don't mind that. But I could see where people would be like, yeah, I'm not wasting my time with this. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I liked it. I think people who are fans of the genre or want to see something different should see it. I think in terms of movies that would make an incredible montage for amazing kills, yeah, this is it. The kills are unbelievable. But yeah, but it's not one that I would say is for everyone by any stretch of the imagination.
Not for hot dog guys.
No, I won't say this is for hot dog. Yeah. Not like Barbarian is for everyone. Everyone. It's the greatest. Barbarian rules. I saw another movie. We're not done. I saw another movie.
Which, by the way, it's funny. Don't forget, every time that you have one of these reviews, you end up back at Barbarian. You just end up suggesting Barbarian.
Barbarian's great. If you haven't seen Barbarian, I would check it out. Can you believe, by the way, there's no home video release for Barbarian? It's
You mean
never
like Blu-ray.
There's no Blu-ray. It's no there's no physical media of Barbarian. I
hope they're not. I hope they're not getting rid of like the whole Blu-ray home video release.
This
thing.
is what I try to tell you. This is what I try to tell people. I know I don't have to tell you. You get it. But like, they're deleting daily shows off of Comedy Central's website. They're going like, Barbarian, we don't need to put that on Blu-ray. Oh, really? What happens when the streaming service goes away?